Blitzkrieg, the Sparkies, the Bug Zappers. This squad has great damage output. They're theoretically able to hit every Vec on the board, and they've got a low core cap which allows you to focus your cores on one mech. Unfortunately, they're able to hit every unit on the board, even their own, and it makes them terrible in any mission where you've got to defend units. Let's break them down. We start with the headliner, the Lightning Mech, a Prime Mech, armed with the Electric Whip. Melee attack, does 2 damage to target, chains through adjacent units. Unusually for weapons in this game, it cannot attack tiles that do not contain valid targets. It means you can't spend a free turn to damage a mountain or start a forest fire. It costs 2 cores of power, it costs 1 core to chain through buildings, and indeed target buildings at all, and 3 cores to increase that damage output by 1. It's a linchpin of the squad. It's going to be doing most of your damage and your kills. It means that any pilot will level rapidly in it, and it can be worth rotating pilots at times just to speed up unlocking those skills. Next up is the Hook Mech, which is an armored brute mech. It's armed with the grappling hook. It's a direct fire weapon that pulls the unit towards a mech, or pulls the mech towards like a building or a mountain. It's free to power, and for 1 core it shields allies when it targets them, which I have to say I've never found a good use for that upgrade. I don't actually pull allies very often, and it's always just seemed like a waste of a core. If it shielded itself rather than allies, it'd be way more useful. And finally you've got the Boulder Mech, which is ranged. It's armed with the Rock Accelerator, which is an indirect fire weapon that throws a boulder. If it lands on an enemy it does 2 damage, otherwise a boulder remains in the target square. It also pushes the tiles on either side of the target. Costs 1 core to power, and 2 cores to increase the damage by 1. This weapon is surprisingly flexible. It does knockback, damage, and can block shots, though it can't of course perform all 3 at the same time. Strategy. The achievements aren't too bad here. Obviously lightning wars are relevant, you just have to play fast, but chain attack and hold the line do push you towards the squad ideals. You want to try and lure as many enemies as possible close to the Lightning Mech. You're going to get nice big chains through as many Vec as possible. Use your boulders and Hook Mech to try and extend that chain where you can, and the more bugs you can zap the better. This does of course mean that you'll end up chaining the lightning through the Hook Mech. This is kind of inevitable because without the ability to push Vec with an alternate weapon or ability, the Hook Mech can only basically pull itself or Vec into the chain. Fortunately, the 1-pointer armor it has lets you pull this trick a couple of times in a fight, but when you upgrade the damage on the Electric Whip, keep that in mind. You'll also need to upgrade the health on the Hook Mech. And this squad's biggest weakness is defense. If possible, don't take any missions where you have to defend units. Buildings, fine. Units, no. This covers more than you might first assume, because units can be stationary things. If you're asked to defend terraformers, rockets, tanks, earthshakers, or bombs, basically all of them tend to be where Vec will spawn. If any melee unit attacks one of those units, the whip will take out the friend along with the foe. The other weakness is of course Vec movement. The Electric Whip does an impressive amount of damage across multiple Vec, but won't move them an inch. When you start facing alphas and bosses, that doesn't always cut it because it won't kill everything it zaps. And finally, remember in a pinch, the Rock Accelerator's boulder can be used to block fire, Vec movement, or even Vec spawning. It should always be able to do something useful, even if there's no targets that it can hit. What are good pilots for this squad? Hazza or Kaz and the Hook Mech work really well. They give you that extra flexibility by letting the Hook Mech push as well as pull. It means often you can avoid cooking the hook along with the Vec. Kaz of course brings extra damage to the table, but on the other hand you can't repair, which means that you really need to avoid being in the chain more than once or twice in a battle. And Shenrong's another good candidate for the Hook Mech. You don't get the same flexibility regarding moving the Vec, but it does mean that you can sidestep out of the way once you've hooked a Vec in, generally leaving the chain. And finally, Silica seems like a good choice. I mean, in fact, I know they're a great choice late game, because you put them in the Lightning Mech and they can zap twice, which means that they can kill even the hardiest of alphas. But I kind of feel like they're a bit of a trap. They're not very good as a time traveler, because even if they got +1 reactor, they're pretty much a dead pick until you get your first core, and that may be almost all of the first island away. That's my advice for the Blitzkrieg. Next time round, we will take the hazardous mechs for a spin